Hello and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and in studio today our guest is Tom Butero. He has a master's in social work. He's a licensed social worker. And thanks for coming on. We've got a serious topic today.
Yes, we do.
Tom is the author of the book, I Don't Want to Die, a new look at suicide assessment, intervention, and prevention. A long title, lots of things right there. First, thanks for coming on. Thanks for the book and what have you. What a topic. You've been doing this for 50 years.
I started 50 years ago as an undergraduate in college, working in an on-campus crisis center. And that's where I first got interested in the subject, and it's just kind of stayed with me throughout my career.
And put it into perspective too. I mean, 50 years. It's obviously changed from strategies and what have you. What are the biggest takeaways that you've seen in the 50 years? What are the things that have really changed, and what are the things that, at its core, have stayed the same?
That's a good question. I think there's a heightened awareness of the issue, and that's been a progressive thing throughout the time. More and more people becoming aware of this as a problem, sometimes within their own families, sometimes within their own community, whatever. But I've seen that grow exponentially, and I think that's a good thing, because the more awareness people have of the problem, the more they are aware of what the issues are, what to look for, what the signs and symptoms are, the more we're able to prevent a suicide. So that's the one thing that I see. The things that have stayed the same, I think for the most part, the warning signs have been pretty consistent throughout. The role that depression plays in suicide has pretty much stayed. But even there, we've expanded our reach as well. Beyond depression, to beginning to look at things like bipolar disorder, other sorts of mental disorders that contribute to the problem as well. So it's a wide picture, no doubt.
You hear society now, and I mean, it seems to me at least, there's more emphasis on, quote, mental health than there has been. Government has put money into the issue of mental health. It's certainly not enough.
And they're taking some back.
But it's more than it was 50 years ago, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Is that something that, I mean, the trend is, well, as you said, they're taking it back, too. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing right now. Because it doesn't seem as though the issue is slowing down at all.
No, nationally the numbers are actually going up.
And you and I were talking about this off camera too. Is that because we're more aware, or
it's happening more often? That's a good question. It's a very good question. But certainly there are subgroups that we can pinpoint and say that it's not because of better reporting. The numbers are actually going up. Combat veterans, for example. The suicide rates among returning combat veterans has skyrocketed. LGBTQ plus youth and young adults, the rate for that population is through the roof. So there are certain identified groups where the numbers have gone way, way up. For the general population, they've actually gone up since probably about 2010, 2015, they're starting to level off, but they haven't gone back down either. So there's a peak there as well.
This is not an age issue either, right?
Only in terms of the highest risk level when you measure it by age, and the highest risk by age is actually men over age 80.
Really?
Yeah. Used to be men over age 50 to 65. And that's gone up. And it begs the question for me of, were those 50 to 65 men now the 80 to 85 men? Is it the same group? I don't know, I can't say. But certainly say age, you can look at that and say there are certain age groups that have a higher risk factor than others.
Because there is an emphasis, it seems, publicly on youth suicide. But I know that talking to people, especially after COVID, I mean, the isolation, the depression for adults and elders was unbelievable. Or it still is, yeah. Still unbelievable, and that's why I'm asking if, age really isn't an issue in this instance.
It's not the only issue, let's put it that way. Certainly when you're looking at risk factors, you want to take age into consideration, but that's just one small piece of the puzzle. There are many other factors that you have to consider.
What prompted you to write the book in the first place? Other than just insanity on your part, what prompted you to write it?
I'll tell you a quick story. Over the years, I've done hundreds of workshops, seminars, training programs for professional groups, parents, clergy, teachers, you name it. Just before I retired from my job, I did a program for a group of outpatient mental health clinicians. And as they were walking into the room, one of them looked at me and said, "Which model of prevention are you going to be presenting today?" Because there are several out there. Mm-hmm. And I thought for a minute, and I looked at her and I said, "Tom's?" Meaning,
yours, yeah.
That's when I decided I needed to go home and put what I know down on paper, that it was time to take all the collective knowledge and experience that I've gathered over the years and put it on paper. So that's what prompted the book, actually.
You write that the book is sort of a different way to look at suicide prevention, and you look at it from the three phases, which are in the title of your book: assessment, intervention, and prevention. Is any one of the three more important? I would assume assessment has got to be, because if you don't have the other two, unless you can assess correctly what a person's going through.
Right. And intervention is an offshoot of that. And even when you're doing an intervention, when you've got a client sitting there in front of you and you're trying to work with them around talking them through their suicidal ideation, at the same time you're assessing risk in your head. You're asking certain questions, you're mulling things over, so the two kind of go hand in hand. And the two things that, my editor and I played around with the title and the subtitle, and he's the one that actually came up with a new look at. And there are two areas in particular that I talk about that I don't hear a lot of other people referring to. One of them is the concept of ambivalence. And ambivalence in this case, for this person who is experiencing suicidal ideation, is the wish to live and the wish to die both going on at the same time. It's there. It's always there.
You talk about that, and the one thing that I just want to mention this because I think the line is great. When you're talking to a client, instead of focusing on the suicidal tendencies, your thought is ask about why they want to live.
Yeah.
And when you hear about it, it's like, why do you feel this way? And they're talking about their negatives, and you're trying to accentuate the positives.
Exactly. Yeah. Rather than explain to me why you want to die, tell me about the part that wants to live.
And you said
it's there.
And you said it may be minimal, but it's there.
It could be very little, but it's there. And tapping into that, as you say, it puts a positive spin rather than a negative. But it also helps the person to kind of examine that. Oh, I thought about that, but I never really put it in those terms for myself. I'm talking about the client.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of opens up a conversation about that. The other thing that's important when you're intervening is that suicidal feelings are temporary. Suicidal ideation is a combination of thoughts and feelings. And like any other thought and feeling, you can't hold on to it forever. They come, they go, they linger, they get worse, they get better. But it's never there's a myth that says once a person is suicidal, they're always suicidal. And that's just not true. A person might be suicidal today and not tomorrow, last week and maybe not today. So when I'm working with someone, I won't say to them, don't kill yourself. I will say, don't do it now. Let's put it off for however much time we can buy with each other. Mm. Let's talk about what's going on. Maybe there's some alternatives you hadn't thought about. When you leave my office, if you decide to go home and make a suicide attempt, that's your decision. But let's see if there's a way that you can at least put that off for the time being, and let's try to look at some other alternatives for you. So those are the two main concepts that I think make my approach a little bit unique and a little bit different.
You talk about, too, for the assessment, it focuses on content and process, and the when, where, and how.
Right. The content is, let's look at your symptoms of depression. Let's look at the seriousness of those feelings of depression that you're experiencing. Let's look at any other mental illness-related issues you may be experiencing, bipolar disorder, for example, other things like that. Let's look at your life situation. Let's look at what's going on for you right now that brought you to this point. So that's all content stuff.
Mhm.
What I also like to look at is what I call process. And process is, when did you first feel suicidal? When did those feelings come about? How long ago did that happen? Are those feelings constant? Do you experience that ideation all the time, constantly, or are they intermittent? And if they're intermittent, how long do those feelings last? Is it a day, a week, a month, an hour, a minute, whatever? The more consistent, the more they hold on to those feelings, the more at risk. Person says, oh, I was feeling suicidal 2 weeks ago, but I haven't really felt that way since. That person's, again, all things being relative, at less risk. The last thing I like to ask the person, and this kind of throws people a little bit of a curve, is how do you feel about those feelings? How do you feel about your suicidal ideation? And again, it's another way of becoming a little more introspective, a little more, for them to kind of look at it in a different way. And I basically get two responses. Most people, oh, not most, but a lot of people will say, well, you know, I thought about that. I thought about my feelings, and I think that's the answer for me. I think suicide is the answer for me. That person is obviously at a much higher risk. Someone who comes in and says, you know, those feelings, I'm really frightened by them. They scare the hell out of me, and I don't think it's something I would ever act upon. That person, all things being relative, is at lower risk. So that tells me a lot about what's going on.
You know, I remember somebody saying years ago to me, if somebody says they've thought about it, then they've thought about it and they should act. But I'm curious as to if you're a family member or a friend or whatever, I mean, you're not a licensed social worker. How do you know, what are signs or what should you do in that situation?
Well, the first thing is to know what the signs are. And that takes a lot of education. That's why I try to get out and talk, do seminars, workshops for parents, particularly parents of adolescents, and knowing what the signs are. The next thing is take it seriously.
If they just say it.
If they say it, if a person says, I'm feeling suicidal, they're saying it because they're feeling suicidal. And there's a myth that says people who talk about suicide don't really mean it. That's just absolutely not true. People talk about suicide because they're feeling suicidal. So take them seriously. Mm-hmm. Sit down, if it's a family member or a friend, sit down, have a conversation with that person. What's going on? What made you feel that way? What can I do as a friend or family member? Is there something I can do to help? Do we need to consider getting professional help? And that's kind of the last piece of that. Mm-hmm. But the biggest thing is to take it seriously every time.
We are talking with Tom Butero. He's a licensed social worker, and he's written a book, I Don't Want to Die, A New Look at Suicide Assessment, Intervention, and Prevention. And he's joining us today to talk about that. You know, we talked about mental health issues, and these things, you know, that we're talking about, it's such a serious issue right now. But again, I don't think people who don't feel that way, I don't think they understand either what that person is feeling. Mm-hmm. But sort of expand on what you were just saying. I mean, really the first thing is, as you said, take it seriously, and then you've got to talk to that person. You just can't blow it off. Because ultimately it's out of your league in a sense. That person's going to need to talk to somebody more efficient, more professional than just you, but you have to start the ball rolling.
Right.
And that's not an easy conversation.
And it's particularly the case with adolescents. I have yet to see adolescence was my other specialty. I loved working with those kids. I'm not exactly sure why, but I did. Never have I ever seen an adolescent come to their parents and look at them and say, Mom, Dad, I'm just feeling really depressed. I just don't know what to do with myself. My life is a wreck, and I think I want to kill myself. Yeah. It doesn't happen that way.
You read about those all the time. Like the parents nobody has any idea. Right. What do you say? What do you do?
Well, that's the other side of the coin. And I always say to parents when I do like a workshop, I don't know any parent who walks around wondering if their child is suicidal. It's just not a natural, normal way of living. But at the same time, understand there are certain things that you can watch for. Changes in behavior, signs of depression, changes in eating habits, sleep habits, changes in school performance, lack of interest in anything. All of these pieces that if you start to put them together, start to paint a picture that says, maybe there's something going on here that I need to pay attention to. And it's not just for parents either. Teachers are in a great position.
Yeah.
Again, it puts a lot of onus on teachers, and I understand that. But at the same time, we all have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility.
Just as humans, we all have the responsibility,
Yeah.
no matter what age, really. Yeah.
The problem is you can educate people as much as you can, but unless they take that information, unless they take that education and put it to use.
It's funny, as you were talking about a child going to their parents, I would assume then that really, in a sense, siblings, if they have one, are a huge conduit to try to get the information out, because a child might be more willing to talk to a sibling than their parent.
Or a peer, a friend.
Yeah.
Either.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And, if you're, I'm just using an age, 14-year-old, and that's a hard thing for another 14-year-old to try to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. I've done a series of education programs for high school youth. We would literally go into an assembly with 200 students and talk about this. And the question would always come up of, if you have a friend who goes to you and tells you they're thinking of killing themselves, would you keep that secret? And a lot of kids will respond to that and they'll say, well, I don't want to narc on my friend, especially if they told me it in secret. My response was always the same. You're not narking on a friend, you're saving their life. And that friend may be mad at you for breaking their confidence with you, not keeping their secret, but they're going to be alive. So if you know something, tell someone. That's the best advice I can give.
You were saying that middle school's sort of the toughest age for children dealing with these mental issues, or at least it's a good starting age when they're dealing with these issues.
Yeah. I want to write an article. I have a little bit of a blog going on my website, and I want to write an article about who invented middle school. That age group, and usually it's like 11, 12, 13 through maybe 14, 15, 16. Developmentally, they're going through some of the most rapid and radical changes of any other developmental phase in life, physically, emotionally, and any other way you want to talk about. The vulnerability of that age group for criticism, for being mocked or bullied, is probably higher than any other time in their life. The self-doubt, the questioning of themselves, all of these things at that particular age are just extreme issues for a child that make them in some ways even more vulnerable. Put social media into the mix, and now you've got a recipe for disaster.
I was going to touch upon that, social media and the electronic devices. I mean, 50 years ago when you started out, those things didn't exist.
Right.
How much have they exacerbated the problem?
Again, I don't want to blame social media.
No, you can't, but.
We can. But it's actually a good thing for some people. If you're homebound, it's a way of connecting with people.
A lot of Zoom, FaceTime.
I connect with my family in California, via social media. So there are positives there as well.
Yeah.
The problem is when social media is being used, in the other way. And you can start rumors. You can bully someone via social media.
Too.
Exactly. You can do all of this without ever, revealing who you are or why you're doing this. You can make up stories about people. You can do all sorts of things that hurt others.
Yeah.
And that's the piece of the social media that is different now.
Well, the one thing that I think, and I was telling you the story off camera about what a friend of mine said about the fact that kids haven't been punched in the nose, and he gave the example of you growing up and you're playing an organized event or doing something, and you get in a fight with one of your friends,
Yep.
physical fight, you get punched in the nose, and 3 hours later they're calling you up, hey, you sleeping over tonight. But there's not that much and I get what he's saying is like, it's not like that anymore. There's not a lot of kids doing stuff like that,
Right.
figuring things out on their own,
Right.
and just doing face-to-face things with other kids. Whereas now there's a lot on because they're home. They're not doing face-to-face things.
Right, and they haven't experienced failure in
Yeah.
a lot of cases. I worked in a community for a while, upper middle class community. I had this senior in high school brought in to see me because she was depressed. And the reason she was depressed, and this is real, the reason she was depressed was because she had to take the school bus to school. Seniors didn't take the school bus. They drove their cars. That feeling on her part of low self-esteem, depression, people are going to laugh at me when I get off the bus, that was just as real for her as someone who may have experienced a traumatic loss of some
Right.
kind.
It could be anything that triggers the depression or the anxiety or what have you.
Yeah. So you have to take it all seriously, and you have to take it from the perspective of that person.
What are some of the, we've got about 5 minutes left here, but I want you to touch upon in the book there, what is the biggest takeaway that you want people to get from your book? And we'll talk about where they can get the book and what have you, because I think it'd be great for people to obviously take a look if they've got family or whatever. It's just a good learning thing. But what's the one thing you want people to take away from the book after they read it?
Well, I think a couple things, actually. One is I wrote it in a way that's very readable. It is written primarily for mental health providers in terms of techniques and approaches, but anybody could pick it up and read it and get something out of it. But the main thing for me, not just with the book, but with the field in general, is that suicide is preventable.
Well, I think one of the things you said, it's the most preventable death.
It's one of two. The other is homicide. And the reason is because suicide is a behavior.
Yeah.
It's an act. It's something that someone does. Behaviors can be changed, behaviors can be prevented, behaviors can be stopped if you know how to recognize it and if you know how to intervene. And that's the biggest thing that keeps me going in terms of working on this, advocating for more suicide prevention services. And that's the hopeful part. The hopeful part is it can be prevented. Not every time,
No.
In fact, there are cases of, I think it was in Florida somewhere, a suicide prevention center opened up and then their numbers actually went up. Now again, was that better reporting or what? Who knows? But the biggest takeaway is this is preventable, absolutely.
Do you see that, are there more professionals going into the field to help people? Or is that one of those things where there's not enough counselors or clinicians or what have you, there's not enough of those to take care of the people?
Go into any social service mental health agency and ask them about their waiting list. And that'll answer the question. Private practitioners, my wife has a small private practice, mental health. People are clamoring to get in the door. So, no, there's not enough. And there's a lot of reasons for that.
Pay?
That's one of them.
Well, that's why on the aside, sort of in the same vein, primary care physicians, there's not enough of those because the money's, you're better off being a specialist than a primary care.
The stress of the job.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that go into it. You go and get your master's degree, which is required if you're going to be providing outpatient mental health services in most states. And you're getting paid $20 an hour, maybe more some places. And how much have you invested in terms of time, energy, and your own money to get that degree?
Right.
I know of a lot of people who leave the field because they just literally can't support themselves or their families.
I would think too that I was trying to tie it into schools, but I mean, they almost need their own counselors, but as you said, teachers are sort of having to do this on their own too. And
Yep.
I mean, I don't know if there's any, when you're going through your teaching program, if there's any sort of program that deals with that, but that's a hard thing to add to a teacher to try to figure out, hey, is this kid in trouble?
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I
And
can't,
never mind kids. I mean, how do you do it with, like you said,
Peers.
with adults?
yeah, other teachers. Yeah, and I can't say in terms of teachers' programs, education programs, whether or not they're getting any kind of training. I really don't know. I will tell you this, though, in New Bedford, we're lucky. Child and Family Services, I can't say for certain right now, but historically has had a master's level clinician in every school in New Bedford, a school-based therapist that kids can go to and see during the day. And that's been going on for years.
But is it common for somebody that's going through this to actually seek help? Or is it the person who looks at the signs and says, I think they need help? It'd be easier if somebody did it, but I would think that that's not common.
More often than not, they're being either urged by someone, a family member or a friend, they're being referred by someone, maybe a family physician who's in a position to recognize what's going on, something along those lines. I'll tell you, when I used to work at Child and Family, I was director of one of the outpatient clinics, and we did a study. Child and Family has the crisis center here in New Bedford. They would do their thing, very short term, a couple of sessions, and then refer them to the clinic for ongoing services. 50% of the people who they referred would show up. 50% of the people who showed up for the first appointment never came back.
Wow.
We live in a very, I don't know how to put it other than to say we live in a very crisis-oriented kind of mentality of once the crisis is taken care of, once things are back to whatever normal is, you know, I can just get on with my life and not worry about it. You can bet that person's going to show up again at some point.
Tell us how we can get a copy of the book, and give us just a quick thing for people who need advice and need help. Where should they turn to?
The book is available. You can go to my website, tombutero.com, and that will give you all the information you need about where the book is available and how to get it. It's mostly through online bookstores. But like I say, if you go to Tom Butero, www.tombutero.com, that'll direct you to where you can pick up the book. Resources, again, New Bedford Child and Family Services has extensive programs throughout New Bedford and throughout the area. There are several other agencies out there. I can't actually remember the names of most all of them, but they're not the only game in town. Private practitioners are available as well.
It's the old adage: if you see something, say something.
Exactly.
You really have to.
Exactly.
Hey, Tom, it's been great having you on.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the book. I know
Thank
it's
you.
so
I appreciate it.
tough topic, but it's certainly needed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.